He came back from war, but his dog never left that yard. The gate creaked like it hadn't been touched in years. Weeds clawed at Ethan's boots as he stepped onto the property that once held every piece of his childhood. 13 months. That's how long he'd been gone, serving, surviving, trying to come back whole. But this silence, this house with windows like blank eyes, it didn't welcome him. It mourned. His mother's rose bushes were unrecognizable, wild, thorny, blooming into nothing. The porch swing swayed faintly in the wind, but not from joy, from ghosts. Then, a sound. So faint he thought it was memory. A scratch. Then a whimper. And from the shadows of the collapsed dog kennel came the one thing Ethan never expected to find alive. Him. His partner. His canine. Ghost. Starved. Wounded. Still wearing the rusted collar Ethan had buckled himself before deployment. He had waited, and what followed would break the internet and rebuild 2 broken souls. The bus exhaled a hiss of air behind him, then rumbled off into the dust. Ethan Mallory stood still for a moment, his boots rooted to the cracked pavement of a town that hadn't waited for him. He adjusted the duffel bag on his shoulder, the strap digging into the same spot it always did during deployment, as if war had marked him in ways that followed home. The evening light fell heavy gold and gray at once, like it couldn't decide whether to offer warmth or shadow. He started walking. The neighborhood looked the same, but it didn't feel the same. There was a quiet here, but not the kind that soothed. It crept, the kind of quiet that made your skin tighten, that whispered, "Something's missing." Ethan passed the old Miller place, now boarded up. The corner store was gone. A gas station stood in its place, soulless and sterile. But it wasn't until he turned down Maple Hollow Lane, toward the house where he was raised, that the silence turned personal. The mailbox was rusted shut. The number 423 hung crooked on the side, one nail loose. Grass had overtaken the walkway, curling over the edges of each stone like fingers. And there, just to the left of the porch, were the rose bushes. His mother had once called them her therapy. She pruned them every Saturday morning, humming the same old Patsy Cline songs with pruning shears in hand. They were wild now, thorny and tangled. Some stems bent under their own weight. Blooms had long since withered, dried into paper-thin ghosts. He stood there longer than he realized, staring at them. Part of him expected to see her come out with a hose in hand, wiping her brow with the back of a glove. But the porch light was off, the curtains drawn, and the welcome mat was missing. Ethan climbed the steps slowly. The front door was locked, not jammed, just untouched. He circled around back, the gravel crunching beneath his boots like glass breaking. The gate moaned when he pushed it open. The backyard was worse. Fence panels hung loose on broken hinges. The vegetable garden had collapsed into a bed of weeds and brittle tomato cages. Wind stirred an empty swing, the creak echoing louder than it should have. He called out once. "Mom? Dad?" His voice cracked. Not loud, just enough to break the air. There was no reply, only the sound of a dry wind catching in the trees. He walked up to the back door, the one that always stuck in the summer. It used to groan like a tired old man. But now, it gave way too easily. No resistance, just an emptiness waiting on the other side. Inside, the house was still. Stale air, dust curling in the last light of day. It smelled like time had stopped trying. Ethan pushed the door shut behind him, but the sound echoed as if the walls themselves had forgotten the rhythm of presence. No humming appliances, no ticking clock, just the soft creak of wood adjusting to an intruder it once knew. He stepped into the hallway, boots leaving faint imprints in the dust. The air was dry but heavy, as if it carried stories that hadn't been told in years. A photo frame lay face down on the narrow table by the door, probably knocked over by time, or maybe memory. He reached down, turned it gently. It was him, clean-shaven, uniform crisp, flanked by his parents, all three of them smiling as if they knew what tomorrow meant. His father's arm was around his shoulder, his mother's hand on his chest, like a blessing. Ethan stared. He didn't feel like the man in the photo. That man had plans. That man believed in return tickets. He set the frame back down, this time upright with a care that bordered on apology. And then the silence grew louder. It wasn't just absence, it was abandonment made real. A fridge unplugged, a single fork in the sink. The curled edges of old mail. Everything had the stillness of something waiting to be forgotten. He wandered into the kitchen. The tile was cracked near the sink where the floor had settled. Above it, the calendar still showed July. No year, just July. A photo of a golden retriever wearing a sun hat looked down at him like a joke too cruel to laugh at. He opened a cupboard. Empty. Another. One chipped coffee mug with a faded marine emblem sat alone. He took it down anyway, washed it, not because he needed coffee, just because doing something reminded his hands they were still his. On the table sat a stack of unopened letters, some yellowing, some marked "Final Notice." He didn't open them, not yet. Instead, he walked through each room like a man returning to the site of an old battle. His childhood bedroom was barely touched. Faded posters, a drawer that still stuck, the scent of laundry detergent so faint it felt like a memory half recalled. He stood in the doorway for a long moment, then turned back down the hall. That was when he noticed it. A door ajar at the back of the house. The mudroom. He remembered this door. It used to stick-needed a hard pull and a hip shove. He placed his hand on the knob and paused. A sound, not loud, not clear, but there. A whisper in the dark. A scraping. He opened the door slowly. The last rays of light revealed a torn coat rack, boots thick with mold. The air was colder here. Outside the mudroom window, the backyard was barely visible through ivy and grime. But in the corner where the kennel used to be, he saw something slumped against the fence. A heap. A shadow. A shape too intentional to be debris. His throat tightened. He pushed open the back door and stepped onto the porch. The boards groaned. The air shifted. He moved slowly, boots crunching on dead leaves and gravel. The closer he got, the more the shape took form. Fur. Matted. Ribs. Breathing barely. Then eyes. One of them opened. And even through the dirt, the scars, the sickness, Ethan knew. He was halfway to the kitchen when he heard it. At first it was so faint he thought he imagined it, just a whisper against the wind like a memory brushing the edge of sound. But then it came again, a scratch, weak, desperate, followed by the softest whimper, broken like a breath cut short. Ethan froze. He turned his head toward the backyard. The porch door, once always propped open with a brick, was now swollen with humidity and age. He shoved it with his shoulder. It groaned open, releasing a waft of dry rot and old leaves. The sound came again. Scratch, whimper. His heartbeat ticked up. The air was thicker now, like something unseen had settled over the yard. He stepped outside. The garden path had all but disappeared beneath ivy and wild growth. The swing still creaked behind him, but his eyes were fixed on the back corner of the yard, the farthest point from the house. The kennel, or what was left of it. It had collapsed inward, its roof slanted like a dying animal bowing to the earth. Weeds had claimed its foundation. One of the wooden slats dangled loose, swaying in the breeze. And just inside the shadows, movement. Ethan pulled the flashlight from his backpack, thumb trembling slightly as he clicked it on. The beam cut through the dimness, slicing across vines and debris, then froze. There, in the deepest corner of the kennel, lay a shape, a dog, or what remained of one. Ribs jutted out beneath matted fur. One hind leg lay twisted at an unnatural angle. Flies circled lazily around open sores. The dog didn't lift its head, just shivered, each breath shallow, labored. Its eyes were filmy, glazed over, but they tracked the light. Then, just barely, they landed on him. Ethan stepped forward, stunned. His mouth opened, but no sound came. The flashlight trembled in his grip as the beam caught the faint glint of metal at the dog's throat. A collar, cracked, caked with mud and rust. But beneath the grime, a name, just one word, nearly unreadable. Ghost. The world seemed to tilt. A wave of nausea, then disbelief, then something deeper. Something wordless rose in his chest. Ghost. His ghost. The same canine partner he'd raised from a pup. The one he trained in scent detection, in signals and silent commands. The one who never broke formation. The one he'd trusted with his life in every simulation. The one he whispered to on the tarmac before his deployment. "I'll come back for you." Ethan staggered forward, dropping to his knees outside the kennel. "Ghost," he choked, barely above a whisper. The dog stirred. It took effort, immense, visible effort. But Ghost dragged his broken body forward an inch, then another, until his snout pressed softly, blindly, against Ethan's boot. He didn't bark, didn't cry. He just rested there and wagged his tail once. A flicker. Weak. But it was there. Ethan's hands trembled as he reached out, touching the fur that no longer felt like fur, brushing away filth and dried blood. Tears clouded his vision, fell hot and fast. The kind that come when guilt meets love and there's no word big enough to hold either. "Oh God, I left you." Ghost didn't move. He didn't need to. He had waited. Ethan didn't remember how he got the gate open, only the sound it made, splintering against its rusted hinge as he forced it wider with his shoulder. Ghost whimpered, too weak to resist as Ethan slid his arms beneath him. The dog weighed almost nothing, bones and breath. His body sagged, head lolling into Ethan's chest. And that's when Ethan cracked. The breath he'd held broke into pieces in his throat. He sank into the dirt, one knee hitting hard, clutching Ghost against him as his body shook. "I'm sorry, I'm so—" The rest dissolved into sobs, messy, loud. The kind that hollow you out, the kind soldiers aren't supposed to have. But here, in a backyard cemetery of memories and broken promises, there were no ranks, no uniforms, just a man who left and a dog who didn't. "Stay with me, Ghost," he whispered, pressing his cheek into the blood-matted fur. "Don't you leave me now." He stood, gripping tighter, and ran. Through the yard, through the side street, through the night. The flashlight dropped somewhere along the way. His boots pounded the pavement. His lungs burned with cold air and panic. The world blurred past him in streaks of shadow and orange street lamps, and somewhere in the distance, tires hummed on the highway too far, too late. A siren echoed, not real, just a memory. Syria. The convoy, dust choking the air, the blast, the screaming, the silence afterward. Ethan blinked, shook his head. Focus. Not then. Now. He cut through a gas station lot, people staring but not stopping. He didn't care. Ghost was slipping. His breaths were shallow, spaced too far apart. Ethan could feel them weakening against his chest. He burst through the glass doors of the 24-hour emergency veterinary clinic, almost colliding with the front desk. "He's dying," Ethan gasped. "Please, he's my partner, he's my dog, he's all I've got." The tech didn't hesitate. She called out, and within seconds a team appeared, hands gloved and fast, lifting Ghost from his arms onto a stretcher. Ethan tried to follow, but they blocked the door. "Sir, we need space to work. I need to be with him." "He's in good hands. You can't help him like this." He backed away, hands trembling, stained with blood and dirt. He collapsed into a plastic chair, staring at the red smear Ghost had left on his shirt. His whole body buzzed, like it had forgotten how to be still. A few minutes, or maybe an hour, passed before the vet approached. A woman in her 40s, eyes shadowed by exhaustion, but steady. "He's critical," she said. "Malnutrition, severe infection, internal bleeding. One leg may need amputation. He's got less than 24 hours unless we act now." Her voice softened. "It won't be cheap, and I can't promise he'll make it." Ethan didn't flinch. He pulled out his wallet, dropped his ID, a debit card. The emergency cash he'd kept from deployment meant for a used truck, a small apartment, a normal life. "Do whatever it takes." She hesitated. "Are you sure?" He looked her in the eye. "That dog waited for me. I won't let him die alone." She nodded and turned. The last thing Ethan saw before the doors swung shut was Ghost's tail, still, except for a faint twitch. Like even now, some part of him was still trying, still waiting. Ethan stood frozen in the sterile hallway, hand half raised in the air, as if his body hadn't quite caught up to the fact that Ghost was gone from view. The crash of the ER doors echoed back at him, final and cold. Behind them, voices overlapped in clipped urgency. "BP dropping. Get me another line. Vitals unstable." But out here, the world fell eerily still. The blood was still on Ethan's sleeves, still in the grooves of his palm where he had held Ghost's chest, willing the rise and fall to keep going. He looked down. Red under his nails, red on his boots, Ghost's blood. And he hadn't even noticed the pain in his knees until now. Raw from the pavement, from kneeling in the park with Ghost's head in his lap while people screamed and sirens howled and the world tilted. Ethan leaned back against the wall. The corridor light buzzed above him, the only sound now that the doors had closed. His mind reeled backward, past the bark, past the charge, past the sound of tearing fur and snarls. He saw Ghost again, hurtling forward without hesitation, intercepting the other dog mid-air, shielding the child, taking the teeth, taking it all. He remembered the weight of Ghost in his arms, heavier than before, not just in mass, but in meaning. He remembered whispering to him the whole ride, one hand pressed firm against the bleeding, the other tangled in Ghost's fur. "Hold on, buddy. Just hold on. That's all you have to do." And now, just a twitch, just that last little flicker of life as the doors closed. like a flag, trying to rise one more time. He sank slowly to the bench beside the wall, elbows on his knees, forehead in his hands. He wasn't praying. He wasn't even sure if he believed in that anymore. But he was remembering Ghost's first bark, the way he used to sit, alert, like he could hear danger forming in the silence. The way he'd waited. God, how long had he waited? In that kennel, in that yard, in that half-life of pain and loyalty. And when Ethan had found him, barely breathing, barely there, he hadn't lashed out. He'd wagged his tail, just like now. That was the kind of dog Ghost was. Even on the brink, he was still guarding something, still loving someone, still waiting for a reason to stay. And Ethan? He just hoped he hadn't come back too late. The waiting room was too bright. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, cold and clinical, casting everything in the color of hospital tile and sleepless nights. The chairs were lined in a row like forgotten prayers, hard, plastic, beige. Ethan sat in the corner, hunched forward, elbows on knees, hands clasped so tightly the knuckles had turned bone white. Ghost was somewhere beyond the swinging doors, beyond the wall of metal and glass and sterile air. Ethan kept staring at that door like it might blink first, like it owed him something. But it never moved. The room smelled like antiseptic and old coffee. A TV in the corner played a wildlife documentary with the volume turned off. Subtitles crawled across a scene of wolves running across snow. Ethan didn't see wolves. He saw sand and smoke. And that street in Araka where his convoy had been ambushed. He saw the shimmer of heat above broken concrete, the way time slowed after the blast. He remembered the smell not of death, but of after, of gun oil and dust and blood soaked into canvas. Someone screamed that day. He never knew who. He blinked hard, ground himself back to the present, dug his nails into the palms of his hands until he felt pain real, sharp now. The door opened. He shot up before he realized he'd moved. The vet who walked in wasn't the same one from earlier. This one was younger, tall, wiry, and clearly tired. Her scrubs were flecked with something red. Ethan's stomach twisted. "Mr. Mallory?" "Yes." The word caught in his throat. "I'm Dr. Reeves. I'm overseeing Ghost's case now." She took a breath, not rehearsed, just steady. "He's alive, but just barely." Ethan's shoulders sagged. Relief? Not exactly. Just the permission to keep standing. He's severely dehydrated, dangerously malnourished, and has multiple infections. His rear leg is fractured in at least 2 places and may have gone septic. His organs are under stress. We've stabilized him for now, but... She looked at him, her voice gentler now. "He's got less than 24 hours unless we intervene aggressively." Ethan didn't speak. His jaw clenched once, then again. "There's also a high chance of surgical complications. His body's hanging on, but barely. We'll need to act now." "Then act," Dr. Reeves nodded. "There's one more thing. This won't be cheap. Overnight ICU care, blood transfusions, potential surgery. We're talking thousands, maybe more." Ethan didn't flinch. She searched his face, saw the determination there, or maybe the desperation. Either way, she didn't ask again. "We'll need you to sign consent. If there's someone else you want to call..." "There's no one," he said flatly. She held out the clipboard. He took it with both hands. As he signed, the pen shook in his fingers, the ink trailing slightly near the edge of his name. But the signature was there. a soldier's name, scribbled like a promise. Dr. Reeves turned to leave. Ethan sat back down. The wolves on the screen were still running, but now they were slowing. One of them lagged behind. He leaned forward again, forehead in his hands. "Hold on, Ghost," he whispered into the sterile air. "You waited for me. I'm not leaving you now." The words barely left his lips before they dissolved into the silence. No one else was in the waiting room. No footsteps, no rustling papers, no nurses calling names from behind the frosted glass. Just the low hum of a vending machine in the corner and the harsh fluorescent light that made the linoleum floor look like an old photograph, faded, sterile, forgotten. Ethan's fingers tightened, digging into the back of his neck. His dog tags clinked softly against his chest, the only sound tethering him to the present. 13 months overseas, 2 deployments, 3 funerals, and not once did he cry like this. But tonight, everything cracked. Not in rage, not in fear, but in the quiet realization that the only soul who had truly waited for him, who had endured, who had not forgotten, was now fighting for his life behind 2 locked doors. Ghost hadn't barked when Ethan found him. He hadn't whimpered. He had only looked. That broken gaze from the kennel floor bones, visible beneath patchy fur, rusted collar clinging to a name long unspoken, wasn't one of fear. It was recognition, and it wrecked Ethan more than any battlefield had. He rubbed his palms over his face, trying to steady the pounding in his skull. But the pressure wasn't physical. It was memory. Every mission Ghost had been part of, every compound they'd cleared, every time Ethan had whispered, "I've got your 6," and Ghost had believed him. What kind of man lets his partner end up like that? Forgotten, abandoned, left to starve in the same backyard they'd once trained in together. He felt the sting in his throat, the burn in his eyes. He blinked hard. "You waited for me," he said again, slower this time. "Longer than anyone ever should have to." There was no answer, of course, just that humming light and the faint antiseptic tang in the air. But still, Ethan felt something shift in him, something stubborn, something defiant. He sat up straighter. "You don't give up on your partner," he muttered, like reciting an old creed. His eyes moved to the double doors again, the ones Ghost had disappeared behind, swaddled in blankets, wires already trailing from the stretcher. "I don't care what they say," Ethan whispered. "You're coming home, with me, one more time." And then, quieter, his voice nearly breaking, "If I have to crawl beside you for the rest of your life, I will. Just don't let go yet." Ethan didn't hesitate. The clipboard was still warm from his grip when he reached into his back pocket, pulling out the worn leather wallet he hadn't touched since the bus ride. It creaked open like something old and tired, like it knew this was the last time it would carry anything that wasn't grief. He pulled out his military ID first, then his bank card, then a folded envelope, a security bonus from the final months of his tour. Hazard pay, combat zone stipend, the beginnings of a new start, a truck maybe, or an apartment near the river, a mattress that didn't remind him of cots and sandbags. He laid it all on the counter. The tech behind the desk blinked, startled by the stack. "Sir, we—" "Do whatever it takes," Ethan said, his voice low, certain. She nodded without another word. She'd seen this before. Not the exact scene, but the look. The kind where money doesn't matter, only time. In the distance, a metal gurney rolled into view. Ghost lay limp on top, his body wrapped in a thin thermal blanket, one paw shaved and fitted with an IV. A small oxygen mask covered his snout, fogging slightly with each labored breath. Ethan moved to the glass, hand pressed against it. He didn't care that no one else was in the waiting area. He didn't care that he was shaking. He just watched. The surgical team moved like ghosts themselves, silent, efficient. One nurse adjusted a monitor. Another gently checked Ghost's vitals. The vet who had spoken to him, Dr. Reeves, was suiting up, gloves snapped into place, focus set. Ethan caught sight of Ghost's collar still around his neck, now cleaner but still worn letters faint. But there. Ghost. He whispered the name like a prayer, like an apology, like a lifeline. The gurney began to move again, and Ethan stepped back, heart clawing at his ribs. "Hey!" he called out, voice cracking. Dr. Reeves turned. "He's going into prep. Ethan swallowed. "Tell him I'm still here." She paused, nodded, and then the door closed behind them. Ethan was left staring at the reflection of himself in the glass-tired eyes, blood on his shirt, hands that had once fired rifles now trembling from holding a broken dog. He sat down again, not because he wanted to, but because his knees gave out. He pressed his palms to his face, inhaled slowly. 13 months of gunfire, of brothers lost, of nights where he clutched dog tags in darkness and promised himself this would all lead to something real. And yet, here he was. The only thing real was behind that door. A dog who hadn't eaten, who had bled in silence, who had waited, not for days, not for weeks, but for years, clinging to memory like bone, clinging to the scent of a man he once called home. Ethan sat there, the sterile bench beneath him creaking as he shifted forward, elbows on knees, fists clenched like they held something fragile. But his hands were empty. And somehow that felt worse. Ghost had been his partner, his shadow, the one who padded silently beside him through blown-out alleyways in Aleppo, through dust storms in Ar-Raqqa, the one who never flinched under fire, never wavered when Ethan's own voice shook. And yet, when the war ended, Ethan hadn't come back for him. The memory hit like shrapnel. That final flight home, the way he'd looked back over his shoulder at the kennel crates on the tarmac at Ghost, sitting still, ears alert as if waiting for one more command. But orders had come. Papers were signed, assignments reassigned, and Ethan had walked away. "I left you," he whispered now, the words thick in his throat. "And still, you waited." Ghost could have turned feral, could have lashed out. Instead, he had wasted, in silence, in stillness. His loyalty didn't scream. It endured. That realization gutted Ethan in a way bullets never had. He stared ahead, eyes stinging. "I won't do it again," he said aloud, soft but certain, like an oath spoken to a higher power. "Not now. Not this time." Ghost wasn't just a dog. He was proof that love could outlast war, that faith didn't need words to survive. Proof that even the broken still waited for those who left them behind. Ethan wiped at his face only to find his hand trembling. He wasn't used to this kind of pain. It didn't rush in. It seeped slow and cruel, like the realization of what had been lost and what had barely been saved. Somewhere behind the double doors, a heart was still beating. Weak, wounded, but beating. And as long as that was true, Ethan wasn't going anywhere. He pressed a hand flat to his chest, where the tag still hung, his and Ghost's, clinking faintly like a memory trying not to fade. Then he leaned forward again, grounded by nothing but hope and guilt. "Just hold on, buddy," he whispered to no one. "You waited for me. Now it's my turn." And he meant it, down to the marrow. The house greeted him with the same silence it had earlier, only now it felt heavier, like it knew. Ethan closed the front door behind him and stood in the dark for a moment, listening to the emptiness. The weight of the clinic, the blood, the breath, the consent forms still clung to his skin. He didn't take off his boots, didn't remove the stained shirt. He walked straight to the living room and clicked on the lamp in the corner. A soft amber glow spilled out, not enough to reach the walls, just enough to push the shadows back a few feet. It was the kind of light that didn't chase things away, only made them easier to live with. He dropped his keys onto the counter. The clink echoed, then he started moving. No music, no words, just motion. He pulled the old vacuum from the hallway closet and dragged it across the living room carpet until the dust began to lift. He wiped the windows with trembling hands, scrubbing hard enough to streak the glass. He rinsed out the sink, replaced old sponges, swept dust off bookshelves no one had touched in a year. At some point, he found his mother's old candle stash in the cabinet beneath the stairs. Vanilla, citrus, lavender. He lit two and let the flame do what it could against the sterile scent of a home gone hollow. He pulled a heavy quilt from the top shelf of the linen closet, one Ghost used to curl up on during storms, and laid it out on the floor near the couch. He folded a towel into a square and placed it gently at the top like a pillow, then a second towel beside it. Next came the bowls. He rifled through kitchen drawers until he found the stainless steel set, still tucked away like someone meant to come back for them. He washed them by hand, dried them, and set them down, one in the kitchen corner with fresh water, the other beside it, empty for now. Then he opened the freezer. The beef was still there, frost-bitten at the edges, but salvageable. He thawed it in silence, then diced carrots from a half-soft bag he found in the crisper drawer. A cup of rice boiled slow on the stove. The scent rose, warm and soft, not strong enough to cover what the house still carried, but enough to remind it of something living. He ladled the finished stew into a ceramic bowl, covered it, set it beside the towel bed. Then, finally, he sat down. The clock read 3:17 a.m. The lamp flickered once, then steadied. Ethan looked around at what he'd done. Not perfect, not fixed, but different, cleaner, warmer, a kind of readiness. And in the middle of the floor where the light hit just right lay the waiting space, a place for a dog who hadn't given up. So Ethan wouldn't either. The phone rang at 6:12 a.m., just as the first gray light began to crawl through the dusty kitchen window. Ethan had been sitting at the table for hours, unmoving, hands wrapped around a cold cup of coffee he hadn't touched. The house smelled faintly of beef stew and candle wax. His eyes burned, not from sleep, but from the weight of waiting. He didn't jump when the phone buzzed, just blinked, then slowly reached for it like someone afraid to touch hope. "Hello? Mr. Mallory?" A woman's voice came, familiar, steady. "Dr. Reeves." Ethan held his breath. He made it. Those 3 words hit harder than any blast he'd felt in Syria. "He's not out of the woods yet," she continued, "but he pulled through the surgery. The infection in his leg was more extensive than we thought, but we managed to avoid amputation. We're giving him fluids, antibiotics, and pain management. He's stable for now." Ethan swallowed hard, his hand covering his mouth. "When can I bring him home?" he he asked, voice hoarse. "We'd like to monitor him for another 8 hours. But, given his history, I think he'll recover better with you." The call ended with quiet instructions, meds, feeding schedule, limited mobility. But Ethan barely registered any of it. His mind clung to one word: alive. At 2:48 p.m., Ethan parked outside the clinic, heart thudding like he was walking into a firefight. The receptionist nodded and led him down a hallway that smelled like bleach and fur. And then he saw him. A tech pushed the door open, rolling a small cart toward the exit. On it, bundled in a thermal blanket, lay Ghost. He was thinner than Ethan remembered, shockingly so. Half of his right side had been shaved for the surgery, revealing a stitched wound with red edges. An IV line trailed from his front leg. His ribs still showed. His coat was dull. One ear hung lower than the other. He looked like a shadow of the warrior he'd once been, but he was breathing. And when the cart came to a stop and Ethan crouched beside him, Ghost's eyes fluttered open. Not wide, not sharp, but enough. Recognition bloomed slowly, like sunlight through fog. Ghost blinked once. Then his tail, still wrapped in bandage, gave the faintest thump. Ethan pressed his forehead to the edge of the blanket and exhaled. "You stubborn old thing," he whispered. "You really did wait." The tech handed him discharge papers and medications, but he barely noticed. He lifted Ghost gently, feeling the fragility, the heat radiating from healing wounds. But Ghost didn't resist. He nestled in. Outside, the wind had changed, a softness in the air, a promise. Ethan opened the car door, set Ghost carefully across the back seat lined with blankets. "We're going home," he said quietly. This time, he meant it. The first night home, Ghost didn't move. Not much, anyway. Ethan carried him inside with the same caution a man reserves for something sacred like memory or folded flags. He laid him down gently on the quilted bed near the couch, adjusted the blanket twice before leaving it alone. Ghost's breathing was shallow, eyes barely open, but his body relaxed the moment it touched the space Ethan had prepared. And so began the rhythm. Every 4 hours, without fail, Ethan woke to the soft chime of the alarm clock he hadn't used since high school. He prepared Ghost's meals with near-military precision rice, boiled carrots, softened ground beef served in small, warm portions, measured the water, noted everything down in a small spiral notebook titled in block letters, "Ghost Recovery." Time blurred. Morning merged into afternoon. Afternoons slipped into long, uncertain nights. The house stayed quiet, but not cold. Ethan played classical music in the background, low enough not to startle, soft enough to soothe. Vivaldi, Debussy, sometimes old guitar instrumentals that reminded him of porch nights before the war. Ghost would twitch, barely, a paw shifting, an ear flicking, but when Ethan sat beside him and rested a hand gently along his ribs, the movements settled. A breath deeper than the last, a body remembering what safety felt like. Sunlight became their ally. Each morning, Ethan opened the curtains to let the light in, even if Ghost couldn't move to greet it. He adjusted the bed so that the rays reached the quilt. Some mornings, Ghost's eyes would open just enough to follow the warmth across the floor. Sometimes, Ethan would talk. Not much, just pieces of thought. How the stew turned out, what the neighbors were up to. A memory from when Ghost was a pup and barked at his own reflection in the fridge door. His voice stayed low, never demanding response. But something happened. Ghost began to listen. His ears twitched at familiar tones. His nose shifted toward the scent of food before Ethan even brought it over. One evening, when the sun dipped behind the trees and painted the living room in gold, Ghost lifted his head just an inch, then let it fall back into the blanket. It wasn't much, but to Ethan, it was everything. That night, he wrote one sentence in the notebook. Lifted head, 5:42 p.m., looked at light, looked at me. He underlined it twice. The world outside kept spinning cars passing, neighbors mowing lawns, the radio playing somewhere faint and far. But inside that house, between one soldier and one silent sentinel, a new kind of war was being fought. Not with weapons, not for glory, but for the quiet return of something they had both nearly lost: hope. The third morning broke slow and pale, with fog clinging low outside the windows and a silence that felt less like emptiness and more like breath being held. Ethan moved through the house with quiet ritual. The kettle hissed. The notes of a cello drifted softly from the living room speaker. Ghost lay on his quilted bed, just as he had for days, still, curled, unmoving, but not gone. Ethan crouched beside him, bowl in hand, steam rising from the mixture of broth and rice. "Breakfast," he murmured, voice low, worn but steady. "Same deal as yesterday. You get through 2 spoonfuls, I'll throw in a carrot." No reaction. Just the rise and fall of Ghost's ribs, faint but steady. Ethan dipped a spoon into the bowl and stirred. The metal clinked softly against the ceramic. He leaned back against the couch, bowl beside him, legs stretched out. He wasn't sure how long he sat there, staring at nothing in particular, until he felt it. Movement. Small, but present. He looked over, and Ghost's head was lifting. Not far, not fast, but deliberate, inch by inch, the weight of it trembling in his neck. The muscles remembered what to do even if they struggled to obey. His eyes, clouded but aware, found Ethan. Held. Time froze. Ethan didn't speak, didn't blink. He barely breathed. Ghost's head wobbled, then steadied. Then something even smaller happened. His ears twitched left first, then right, and his tail brushed the blanket once, a single slow arc. Ethan's chest cracked open. He dropped the spoon with a soft clatter, hands shaking as he reached out, not to touch, just to be near. His voice caught in his throat. No words came. And then, finally, the tears. Not violent or sudden, but slow. Heavy. They slid down his face like apologies he hadn't been able to say, like relief he hadn't known how to feel. He covered his mouth with one hand, the other hovering over Ghost like a prayer. "You're still in there," he whispered. Ghost didn't wag again. He didn't need to. His gaze was steady, unspoken. "I never left." They stayed like that for a long time, man and dog, silence and breath. No commands, no need. Just a glance that reached across time, across pain, across all the spaces war had hollowed out inside them. Ethan had been pouring water into the dish slowly, as if the sound might startle Ghost when he felt it. That prickle at the back of the neck, that quiet knowing. He looked up. And there Ghost was, head barely lifted off the blanket, ribs still visible beneath his fur, eyes sunken from fatigue and pain, but open and watching him. Not with fear, not with confusion, but recognition. as if some forgotten wire between them had sparked back to life, as if Ghost, beneath all the scars and silence, still remembered his scent, his voice, the man he used to follow into fire. Ethan froze. The dish in his hand trembled. They didn't move, not for a long moment. No call, no command, no grand reunion. Just the stillness of two broken things looking at each other and remembering that once they weren't always this way. In that look, something shifted, not healed, but beginning, like the first light bleeding through a crack in a boarded-up room, like a wound not scabbing over, but finally cleaned, not fixed, but no longer ignored. Ethan knelt beside him slowly, one hand braced on the floor like approaching a memory you don't want to scare off. He didn't speak. Words had failed them both before. Instead, he simply let his palm hover open, patient near Ghost's paw. Ghost didn't move. But he didn't pull away either. And in that tiny space between hand and fur, a bridge rebuilt itself quietly, without fanfare. Trust wasn't loud. It didn't come in salutes or salvos. Sometimes it came in silence. Sometimes it looked like two souls who had every reason to give up, choosing not to. Outside, morning had softened the edges of the world. Golden light spilled through the windows, catching on floating dust. A bird sang distantly, the kind of song you didn't notice unless you'd once known silence too long. Ethan let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. He didn't need Ghost to leap, or bark, or perform. He just needed him to look, to see him, to still be there. And Ghost was. A bit battered, a bit less whole, but present. Still here, still trying. And Ethan, for the first time in what felt like years, felt a flicker of something stir beneath his ribs. Not relief, not peace, but purpose. He reached forward and gently touched the back of Ghost's ear. Ghost didn't flinch. So Ethan whispered, more to himself than anything, "We'll figure it out, partner. One breath at a time." And somehow, that was enough. The house was quiet again. But not the kind of quiet that heals. The kind that presses against the walls, that settles in your lungs like dust. It was just past 2 a.m. when Ethan woke, if you could call it that. His body jolted upright, shirt damp, breath caught mid-scream. The room spun. His chest heaved like he couldn't remember how to breathe without orders. The sound had triggered it. Something sharp, something sudden, a can falling in the kitchen, a gust of wind slamming a loose shutter, didn't matter, not to his nervous system. His hand fumbled for the nightstand, missed, knocked the glass of water over. Shards of memory cut through him faster than any glass could. Syria. Convoy at dusk, shouting in Arabic. An IED they didn't see coming. And the silence after. He gripped the edge of the couch, teeth clenched, eyes unfocused. His breaths came too fast, like he was running but going nowhere. The walls felt too close. His vision tunneled. Hands clawed at his chest as if he could rip the panic out with his fingers. Then, soft. A sound. Not sharp. Not loud. Dragging. Something moved across the floor. Ethan barely noticed until he felt it. A nudge. Gentle. Steady. Right in the center of his chest. Ghost. The dog had crawled from his bed, dragging his healing body inch by inch across the floor, one paw pulling, one leg trailing limp to reach Ethan. He didn't bark, didn't whine, just rested his head against Ethan's chest, his weight like a warm stone anchoring a boat in storm water. Ghost's breathing was slow, measured, calm. A rhythm Ethan's body started to mimic. One breath, then another. He reached out blindly, hand landing on Ghost's shoulder ribs, still too sharp under fur, but real. Here. You shouldn't be moving, Ethan whispered, voice hoarse. Ghost exhaled through his nose. Just a soft breath. But it was enough. The room began to slow. The walls widened again. His hands stopped shaking. He could feel the carpet under his palms, the soft rise and fall of Ghost's chest beneath his fingers. No war, no sirens, just here, just now. Ethan let himself fall forward, forehead pressed to Ghost's fur, not sobbing, not speaking, just breathing, matching. The couch behind him stood empty, but he didn't return to it. He stayed there, on the floor, with the one soul in the house who had heard the silent alarm and answered. The floor had gone cold beneath him, but Ethan didn't move. He sat with his back against the couch, legs stretched out. Ghost's body curled beside him, head still pressed against his chest, like some kind of lifeline that refused to fray. The living room was draped in half-light from the kitchen lamp he'd forgotten to turn off, casting long shadows against the walls like ghosts too polite to interrupt. Ethan stared ahead, eyes red-rimmed, unfocused. His hand absently stroked Ghost's shoulder, slow, almost unconscious. "I used to think I understood what silence meant," he said finally, his voice just above a whisper. "In training, they called it discipline, control, strength." Ghost didn't move, just breathed, slow, heavy, grounded. But it's not. Not always. His throat tightened. Sometimes silence just eats you from the inside. Sometimes it's where all the things you didn't say rot. He looked down, met Ghost's half-lidded gaze, and for the first time since coming home, he didn't feel like he was talking to himself. "I told you I'd come back," he said, "before the deployment. Remember? You followed me to the bus, and I looked you in the eye and said, 'Wait for me.' Like that promise was supposed to be enough to hold the world together." His hand stilled on Ghost's fur. "I shouldn't have left you. I thought I had a plan. I thought they'd take care of you." A breath, shaky, regret-filled. "But they didn't, and I didn't check. I was too busy trying not to lose my mind over there to realize I was already losing pieces of myself here." He swallowed hard. The quiet stretched again. Not empty, just full of weight. "I came back thinking I'd find the life I left," he continued. "But the house was empty. My parents were gone. Everything was gone." He leaned his head back against the couch cushion, eyes to the ceiling. "Except you." Ghost shifted slightly, enough for Ethan to feel the warmth of him against his ribs. A single beat. Steady, present. Ethan looked down again, tears brimming. "Maybe I didn't come back for you," he whispered. Maybe you came back for me." The words hovered in the space between them, soft but unshakable. Ghost didn't wag his tail, didn't lick his hand. He just stayed, still, loyal, as if he already knew, as if that was the whole truth and nothing more needed to be said. Ethan sat on the cold porch step, hands resting on his knees, eyes unfocused, locked, somewhere between now and a memory he'd buried under years of noise. The world was quiet. Not the kind of quiet that comes from peace, but the kind born after a storm. A breath held. A pause too long. Ghost lay beside him, not touching, not crowding. just there. A presence, a weight, a tether. The sun had dipped low, turning the yard into a field of long shadows. Crickets stirred. A breeze carried the smell of pine and dry earth. But Ethan didn't smell any of that. What he smelled was blood, sand, oil, memory. It rose suddenly, uninvited like it always did, when the stillness got too loud. The tent, the blast, the silence afterward, not from peace but from absence. He'd thought he buried that day somewhere no one could dig it up, not even himself. But tonight, with Ghost lying still beside him, the earth cracked. "I thought I was done," Ethan said softly, voice breaking at the edges. Done with feeling, done with trying. He didn't expect an answer. And yet the dog didn't look away. There was no pity in Ghost's eyes, no begging, no pleading, just that same steady presence, that quiet acknowledgement, as if saying, "I know," and maybe that was enough. Because in a world where everyone wants to fix you, sometimes the most powerful thing someone or something can do is just stay, not offer a solution, not run from your silence, just sit beside your pain and refuse to leave. That's what Ghost was doing, not performing, not healing, just being. Ethan felt something tighten in his chest, then release, like an old knot loosening. He didn't cry. Not this time. There were no more tears, just a breath. And then another. He turned his hand slightly, palm up, on the wooden step. Ghost didn't move right away, but after a moment the dog shifted his paw barely, but enough for it to touch Ethan's fingers. That was all. No dramatic moment, no sudden music swell if life were a film, just contact, small, steady, real. And somehow it steadied Ethan more than all the medals ever had. "I left you once," he whispered. "I won't do it again." Ghost didn't react. He didn't need to. He'd already said everything. In his silence, in his staying, in the simple fact that he hadn't left. Sometimes that was the most profound kind of love. The kind that doesn't ask, doesn't demand, just is. The morning came soft and golden, the kind that didn't demand attention, but offered it like an open hand. Ethan sat on the porch steps, barefoot, a mug of coffee resting loosely between his palms. He hadn't added sugar or cream. It didn't matter. The warmth was enough. Ghost lay beside him on an old folded quilt, his body still thin, one paw stretched forward into the light. His eyes were half closed, blinking slow, like he wasn't quite awake, or maybe he didn't need to be. For a while, they didn't do anything, didn't speak, didn't move. They just existed. And for the first time in months, maybe years, the silence didn't ache. It didn't feel like a punishment. It didn't scream with everything unsaid. It felt shared. Birdsong drifted from the trees. Wind brushed gently across the grass. Somewhere far off, a neighbor's sprinkler ticked on and off like an old metronome. The world was waking up in pieces. Ethan let it. He looked down at Ghost. His breathing was steady. Not strong yet, but steady. His fur had begun to grow back near the stitches, and the swelling around his paw had gone down. Every breath he took was a quiet rebellion against the odds. Ethan reached over, let his fingers trail lightly down Ghost's spine. The dog didn't flinch, just shifted slightly and exhaled, a long, contented sound, like a sigh, finally safe to release. The moment held. Then Ethan stood, went back inside. He opened the bathroom cabinet slowly, almost cautiously. Inside, a small orange bottle sat beside the razors and gauze. He turned it over in his hand. Zolpidem, prescribed 2 months before discharge. Take 1 before bed, as needed, for temporary sleep disruption. He hadn't had a single night without them since he returned. But last night, he hadn't taken one, and he'd survived it. Barely. Broken, held together by fur and faith. But he'd made it. Ethan walked back out to the porch, opened the bottle, and poured the pills into his hand. He looked at them a moment longer, then tossed them into the trash bin without a word. He returned to his place beside Ghost and sat. The dog hadn't moved, but his ears turned slightly, acknowledging the choice without fanfare. Ethan leaned back, sipping his coffee. Tomorrow might be hard again, so might tonight. But for now, for this one breath, one morning, one golden stretch of sun, he wasn't at war. Not with the world, not with his past, not with himself. And he wasn't alone. It happened on a Tuesday morning. The sun hadn't fully crested the rooftops yet, and the house was quiet, rested, not hollow. Ethan stood in the kitchen, sleeves rolled, gently dicing carrots for Ghost's breakfast, the smell of beef broth simmering on the stove. The window above the sink was cracked open just enough to let in the breeze and the faint song of birds, distant but real. From the living room, a familiar sound reached him, soft, barely audible. A grunt, then a rustle. He wiped his hands on a towel, stepped into the hallway, and froze. Ghost was moving, not just shifting in place, not just lifting his head. His front paws were planted, shaky, uneven, but planted. His back legs dragged slightly as he pulled himself forward, muscles tight with effort. His breathing hitched. "Easy, buddy," Ethan whispered, as if a louder voice might tip the moment off balance. Ghost paused. His ears twitched. Then, inch by inch, he pushed upward hind legs trembling beneath him, and then he stood, all 4 paws on the ground, unsteady, ribs still showing, left hind leg tucked awkwardly, but upright, whole. He swayed slightly, like a newborn deer, and within 3 seconds his legs gave out. He crumpled gently back onto the quilt with a low huff, but his tail wagged. Once, twice. Ethan's throat tightened so fast he had to blink hard just to see straight. "You," he laughed, or maybe cried, it was hard to tell. "You show off." He dropped to his knees beside Ghost and rubbed gently behind one ear. "You stood, man. That's a hell of a thing." Ghost licked his arm, just once, sloppy, clumsy, perfect. Ethan stood again, walked into the kitchen, and grabbed the only bottle of sparkling cider he'd stashed away since coming home meant for a celebration that never came. He popped it open with a soft hiss, poured it into a chipped coffee mug, and held it up toward Ghost like a toast. "To first steps," he said, his voice full and cracked and proud. Ghost blinked at him, and somewhere in that look, Ethan swore he saw it. Not done yet, not by a long shot. Ghost's eyes opened slowly, lids heavy as if every blink pulled weight from another lifetime. The room was dim, lit only by the golden spill of late afternoon sun brushing across the floor. Machines beeped steadily. Tubes coiled like veins from Ghost's side, whispering breath back into his battered body. Ethan leaned forward, careful not to startle him. He didn't speak. Didn't need to, because Ghost was already looking at him. And somewhere in that look, Ethan swore he saw it. Not done yet, not by a long shot. There wasn't strength in the way Ghost lay there. No proud posture, no military stiffness, just exhaustion, raw and honest. But behind that, in the still dark depths of those eyes, there was something else. Refusal. Refusal to let go. Refusal to be counted out. Refusal to let pain be the end of the story. It wasn't defiance, it wasn't courage. It was something older, quieter, stubborn hope. Ethan had seen that look before, in the mirror, in the desert, in the eyes of soldiers who dragged themselves through sand and gunfire just to pull one more man to safety. The look of someone who'd earned every scar and still wasn't done fighting. "You're still in there," Ethan whispered, his voice barely audible over the pulse of machines. A pause. Ghost didn't wag his tail, didn't shift, just blinked slow and deliberate. But it was enough, because Ethan understood. This wasn't just survival, this was intention. He sat back in the chair, elbows on knees, hands steepled under his mouth. The same man who once crawled through hell with a rifle in one hand and Ghost at his side was now watching the same dog fight his own war. And somehow, it felt harder. Harder. Because this time, all Ethan could do was wait and pray. But that look, that one deliberate, soul-pinning look, it held him together. It said, "I came back for a reason. Don't bury me yet. Not while there's still breath." Ethan leaned closer again and whispered, "Okay, we'll do this your way. Just stay. That's all I ask." A soft exhale came from Ghost's nose, almost like agreement. Not loud, not dramatic, just presence, stillness, the same steady loyalty that had once pulled Ethan out of nightmares, now anchoring him through this one. The minutes passed, maybe hours, time bent in quiet rooms like this, but Ethan never looked away, because somewhere in those broken, bruised eyes was a fire that hadn't gone out. Not yet, not today, not while there was still something worth protecting. And in that truth, Ethan found something too. Maybe he wasn't done either. The mornings came earlier now, not because Ethan couldn't sleep, but because for the first time in a long time, he wanted to wake up. The alarm clock rang at 6:00 a.m. sharp, no snooze button allowed. He rose with a quiet determination, washed his face, brewed coffee he actually drank hot, and scrambled eggs he plated instead of eating straight from the pan. In the living room, Ghost would already be watching, head lifted from his bed, eyes tracking Ethan's every move with that quiet intensity he'd always had during training. The ritual had returned, not the same as before, slower, gentler, but familiar in its bones. Ethan would kneel on the rug in front of Ghost, hold out his hand and say, "Sit." Sometimes it took 2 tries. Sometimes Ghost just looked at him like, "Are you serious? I stood up for the first time yesterday." But eventually, he'd ease into it, shifting his weight carefully, back legs tucking under, tail swishing low against the floor. "Good," Ethan whispered, rubbing behind his ear. "Stay," came next. Then, "Watch me." Focus was the hardest. Ghost's eyes still drifted, unfocused at times, the trauma lodged somewhere deep, but when they did meet Ethan's gaze, when that lock clicked into place, it was electric. The bond wasn't being rebuilt. It was being remembered. Outside, the world continued with its routines, Mail trucks, school buses, morning joggers. But inside their quiet corner of the street, another kind of rhythm had taken shape. Ethan made a chart, an actual hand-drawn chart with feeding times, physical therapy goals, medication dosages. He taped it to the fridge. Below it, he scribbled a quote from one of his old field instructors. "Progress isn't loud, it's consistent." He started prepping real meals again. Eggs, grilled chicken, sometimes fish. He made a second plate, smaller portions, fewer spices, and sat beside Ghost to eat. They didn't speak, obviously, but the silence between bites felt shared. Some afternoons, Ethan read aloud old training manuals, snippets of novels, even the newspaper. Ghost didn't care about the content. He cared about the voice, the tone, the cadence. Other times, they just sat by the open window. Ethan would lean back, legs stretched out, Ghost curled beside him, the breeze ruffling what fur had started to grow back. It wasn't boot camp, it wasn't deployment, it wasn't even physical therapy in the official sense, but it was work, and it was working. Each sit came quicker. Each stay lasted longer. Each watch me brought that spark back, a flicker of the soldier dog who had once obeyed commands in combat zones. But now, those same commands were building something softer, something human. And maybe, Ethan thought one afternoon as Ghost rested his head on his foot, that was the point. Not the medals, not the missions, not the uniform folded in a shadowed drawer, just this. A warm body leaning into his own, a moment that didn't ask for anything, didn't explain itself, didn't need to. The porch was quiet, save for the soft creak of wood and the whisper of wind through the sycamores. Sunlight spilled across the floorboards in long golden streaks. Ghost didn't move, just breathed, just existed. And Ethan let his hand rest on the old shepherd's shoulder, feeling the steady rise and fall, the calm beneath it. It was strange how something so still could anchor him more than all the battles ever had. No commands, no countdowns, just the slow weight of presence. For years, Ethan had believed survival was the goal, getting through the day, keeping the nightmares caged, learning to walk into a grocery store without scanning every exit. But now, watching Ghost doze at his feet, scarred, slower, but still here, he wondered if survival was only step one. Maybe the real victory was letting peace in, not all at once, not in some cinematic burst of revelation, but gently, one exhale at a time. He looked down. Ghost's ears twitched, but he didn't stir. And something in that trust so simple, so full pressed into a part of Ethan that war had hollowed out. A part no therapist had reached, no prescription had touched. Ghost didn't save him with heroics. He saved him with consistency, with waiting, with not leaving, with showing up again and again, even when his own body was failing. And Ethan thought about the others, the men who hadn't made it, the ones whose stories ended before there was time for healing, before they ever got to see what came after. He closed his eyes. Maybe Ghost's gift wasn't just survival. Maybe it was the reminder that broken things could be beautiful too. That pain didn't disqualify you from love. That silence, when shared, could be sacred. That being here, quietly, fully was enough. Ethan leaned back against the porch post, letting the weight of the thought settle. That was the point. Not to forget the war, not to erase what had been lost, but to remember that even after everything, something still waited. A breath, a heartbeat, a tail thump against the floor. A dog who chose to stay. The leash felt heavier than Ethan remembered, not because of its weight, but because of what it meant. It wasn't just a rope of nylon and clips, it was trust. It was memory. It was a line between then and now. He crouched beside Ghost, who stood shakily at the front door, head up, chest out, but legs still unsure. The harness fit looser than before, adjusted to his thinner frame. Ethan double-checked the straps anyway. "You ready?" he asked softly, as if the answer wasn't already shining in Ghost's eyes. Ghost didn't bark, just gave a single, short nod of the head. A warrior's nod. Ethan opened the door. Sunlight spilled across the porch like a welcome-back banner. It wasn't hot yet, just warm enough to soften the morning chill. The sidewalk beyond was empty for now, the block still half asleep. Trees rustled. A sprinkler ticked across someone's lawn. They stepped out together. Ghost limped. Badly. Every few feet he had to pause. His back leg still curled slightly, refusing to bear full weight. But he moved forward, head low, nose twitching at every breeze. To anyone else it might have looked like nothing. To Ethan, it was everything. One house, then another. Past the broken fence where someone's retriever barked once and then lost interest. Past the tree stump he used to skateboard over as a kid. The world hadn't changed, but somehow everything had. Halfway down the block they passed Mrs. Kinley's place. She was out front with a watering can, tending to the hydrangeas. Her eyes flicked up. She froze. Ghost limped slowly past her gate, his gait uneven, tongue hanging slightly from the side of his mouth as he panted. Mrs. Kinley's lips parted, her brow furrowed. She leaned to whisper something to a man standing just behind the screen door. Ethan saw it all. Didn't miss a beat. The judgment in her squint, the tilt of her head, the way people look at something broken and forget what it took to survive. Ethan shifted. He stepped closer to Ghost, his body angled slightly between the dog and the woman. A subtle shield. Quiet. Firm. "Morning," he said, voice calm, but with an edge that said, "Don't." She nodded, too late, then turned back to her flowers like they had more to say than she did. Ghost kept walking. Ethan let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. By the time they reached the end of the block, Ghost was lagging. His front paw trembled as he stepped up onto the curb. Ethan knelt. "Come here, soldier." Ghost leaned into him, grateful. Ethan didn't say anything else, just scratched behind his ear. They stood there a moment, two silhouettes under a sky that hadn't quite made up its mind. Then they turned around and began the long, quiet walk back. Not defeated, not broken, just becoming whole again. The park sat just 6 blocks away, nestled between the public library and the old community garden, where kids used to plant sunflowers in spring. Ethan hadn't been back there since before deployment, not even once. Too many people, too many memories, too many chances for something to go wrong. But that morning, Ghost stood at the door with the leash in his mouth, not barking, not demanding, just waiting. Ethan stared at him for a moment, heart ticking louder than the wall clock behind him. "You sure?" he asked quietly. Ghost blinked once and gave a small wag. His legs were steadier now, though the limp remained a slow drag in every 5th step, like the past leaving a print behind him. Ethan hesitated, then grabbed his keys. They drove the short distance in Ethan's aging truck, windows cracked to let in the crisp breeze. Ghost sat in the back seat, ears perked but calm, nose pressed to the wind like he was reading the air. The park looked the same. maybe a little greener, maybe a little smaller. Kids ran laughing through the open fields, the sharp squeals of tag and swing sets carrying on the wind. A pair of golden retrievers chased each other across the lawn, trailing their leashes like streamers. Sunlight dripped through the trees in patches, warm and dappled. Ethan parked and sat for a long second, staring at the scene. Too many triggers, too much movement. But when he glanced back, Ghost was already standing tail low, body steady, gaze locked on him. "I've got you," Ethan muttered. They stepped out together. The gravel crunched beneath their feet. Ghost stayed close, pacing Ethan's steps. A toddler toddled past with a sticky ice cream cone, glanced at the dog, and grinned. Ghost didn't flinch, just flicked an ear. Ethan felt his shoulders begin to loosen. By the duck pond, a woman nodded politely. "He's beautiful," she said. "Thank you," Ethan replied, surprised at the sound of his own voice. They walked the loop once, then again. With each lap, the tension in Ethan's chest unraveled another knot. Ghost stayed calm, focused. He watched the children, the strollers, the bikes, but never pulled, never barked. At one point, Ethan sat on a bench near a willow tree. Ghost climbed up beside him, resting his head on Ethan's knee as if they'd done this every day for years. The light danced across Ghost's fur, catching on the healed scar near his shoulder, the one that would never fully disappear. Ethan reached down and let his hand settle on Ghost's back. "You did good, buddy," he whispered. Ghost didn't respond. He didn't need to. The world spun on, but for that moment there was peace. Just a man, a dog, and a park full of life they were finally ready to walk through again. The new rhythm wasn't perfect, but it was theirs. Every morning now began with a slow walk around the block, Ghost leading just enough to set the pace, Ethan keeping a steady hand on the leash. The limp was still there, but less pronounced. Every step seemed more confident, like his legs were remembering what they were made for. Neighbors started to wave again. Not all of them, but some. Mrs. Kinley even left a note on Ethan's porch one morning, scribbled on the back of a grocery receipt. "He looks stronger. You're doing something right." No signature, just a smiley face at the bottom, tentative but real. Afternoons were quieter. Ghost would curl on the patch of sunlight that stretched across the living room floor, tail flicking occasionally in dreams. Ethan often sat nearby, leafing through old field notebooks, crossing out pages that no longer felt like they belonged to him. They didn't need words during these hours. The silence had changed. It wasn't a void anymore. It was a truce, a shared breath. By dusk, they'd settle on the porch, same spot, every evening, Ethan in the creaky wooden chair. Ghost stretched beside him on the worn rug that used to belong in the hallway. The world outside would soften orange light, painting the trees, cicadas humming like they had somewhere to be. Sometimes kids played 2 streets over. Sometimes it rained. Sometimes they just sat, and that was enough. One evening, as the sun began to dip below the rooftops and the shadows lengthened like slow exhalations, Ethan glanced down. Ghost's head rested on his knee, eyes closed, chest rising and falling in that steady rhythm that had come to anchor him. The light hit just right, turning his coat golden at the edges, glinting off the scar that ran along his shoulder like a badge no one could ever take away. Ethan reached for his phone. No filters, no angles, no posing, just click one photo. He stared at it for a long moment, not because it was beautiful, but because it was proof. Proof that healing wasn't loud, that some victories didn't come with parades. Just quiet moments, caught in golden light, when everything broken finally sat still. He didn't post it, not yet, but he saved it. Named the file. Here. And for the first time in years, that word didn't feel like a question. It felt like a home. Not four walls and a mortgage, not a place on a map, but a feeling quiet and steady, as if something had finally stopped running. The photo was simple. Ghost's head resting on Ethan's knee, bathed in the soft gold of late afternoon. You couldn't see much else, just the curve of Ethan's jeans, the worn porch planks, and the way Ghost's ears relaxed, not alert for once, but safe. Ethan sat back in the old chair, watching the upload bar crawl across the screen. A few seconds later, it was live. Just a post in a veterans support group. No hashtags, no fanfare. Just 8 words beneath the photo. He waited for me. Now I'm coming back too. Then he closed the laptop. No expectations. No seeking validation, just release. Outside, the wind picked up slightly, rustling the oak leaves above the roof. The house creaked, the kind of sound that used to unsettle him. But tonight, it didn't feel threatening. It felt lived in. Ghost shifted in his sleep, his paw twitching like he was chasing something peaceful this time. Ethan didn't move. Just let the moment breathe. He remembered all the places that word here used to haunt. Are you still here? You're not really here, Ethan. You're home now. But you're not here, are you? They had all meant the same thing. Present in body, absent in soul. But now, with Ghost beside him and his heart not braced for impact, that single word had changed. It wasn't location. It was intention. I'm here, with you, because you waited. His eyes lingered on the spot where Ghost had once collapsed, bloody and broken, but still watching that child, still refusing to give up. That's what people didn't understand about dogs like him. They didn't protect because they were told. They protected because they chose to, because loyalty wasn't a command, it was a promise. And Ethan, he was still learning how to live up to that. He reached down slowly, letting his fingers graze Ghost's fur. The shepherd stirred, nudged his hand once, then sighed back into sleep. That was the thing about healing. It didn't crash in. It arrived like this. One breath at a time, one photo, one post, one quiet night where here no longer echoed like a place he didn't belong. Ethan glanced back at the screen where the post was already gathering hearts and quiet comments. But he didn't open it again. He didn't need to, because for the first time in years he wasn't scrolling for something. He had already found it. He was here. And so was Ghost. It was past midnight when Ethan finally opened his laptop. The house was quiet, Ghost asleep at his feet. A soft snore escaping from time to time, barely a sound, just a gentle hum of peace Ethan never thought he'd hear again. The glow from the screen lit up the living room in cold blue. He hadn't touched his old veteran support forum in over a year. It used to be a lifeline. Then it became a reminder of things he didn't want to feel, of people he couldn't bring back. But tonight felt different. He scrolled past dozens of posts, some angry, some hollow, some painfully familiar. Then he clicked New Post. For a long moment he just stared at the blinking cursor. Then he uploaded the photo, the one from the porch. Ghost's head on his knee. that late afternoon light catching the edges of both of them. No edits, no framing, just truth. His fingers hovered over the keyboard. And then, slowly he typed. He waited for me. And now he's helping me come back, too. He didn't add hashtags, didn't explain, didn't expect anything. He hovered over the post button, hesitated, then clicked it. The screen refreshed. The post was live. Just a quiet ripple in a forgotten corner of the internet. Ethan closed the laptop, exhaled. Let the silence return. By morning, everything had changed. It started with a single like, then a few more, then comments, short, sharp messages from usernames he didn't recognize. Same here, brother. Damn, that hit hard. I lost mine in 2018. This broke me. Didn't know how much I needed to see this until I did. By noon, the post had been shared over 1,000 times. By nightfall, it was on Twitter, then Instagram, then Reddit. Someone screenshotted it with the caption, "This is what loyalty looks like." And people responded. Veterans posted their own photos, dogs they lost, dogs they still had, dogs who carried them through deployments and darkness. Therapists, dog trainers, spouses of soldiers, strangers who didn't say much but wrote, "This saved me today." Ethan scrolled through the messages, eyes blurring. He wasn't used to being seen like this. Not in this way. Ghost lay beside him again, head resting on the top of Ethan's boot, like always. He glanced down. "You didn't just save me," Ethan whispered. "You reminded people they weren't alone." Ghost's tail wagged once, soft, steady. And somewhere far beyond the porch light, the world kept sharing the story of a man, a dog, and the long road back to one another. It was the kind of morning that made the world feel gentle. The sky wore a soft blue, streaked with pale clouds like brushstrokes across canvas. Wind rustled the leaves in the tall oaks, and the park was alive in that quiet summer way. Families setting out picnic blankets, toddlers chasing bubbles, dogs tugging eagerly at their leashes. Ethan stood beneath the old elm by the north bench, one hand in his jacket pocket, the other loosely holding Ghost's leash. Ghost sat beside him, calm, ears slightly tilted back, in alert curiosity. His body had filled out again, still lean, still scarred, but undeniably strong. This had become their routine. One lap around the trail, then a rest beneath the trees, watching the world unfold without needing to fix or flee from it. A little girl squealed somewhere nearby, a burst of pure joy as she chased a butterfly across the grass. Ghost's head turned sharply at the sound, eyes narrowing. His posture stiffened, but he didn't lunge, just watched, alert. Ethan gave a gentle tug on the leash, grounding them both. "It's just a game," he murmured. "Just a kid being free." Ghost's ears flicked. He relaxed. Slowly. Ethan exhaled. Peace. That's what this was. Real, earned peace. The kind built from brokenness, forged in silence. But peace has a sound, too, and when it breaks, it's never loud at first. A low growl echoed across the green, then shouting. The leash was the first thing Ethan saw, trailing through the air like a severed rope. The dog attached to it was large, muscular, eyes wild and locked on the girl with the butterfly wings strapped to her back. It was already running, straight toward her. The mother screamed. Ethan's body moved before his mind caught up. "Ghost, heel!" But Ghost was already rising, not barking, not hesitating, just moving. The leash slipped from Ethan's hand like silk through fingers, and everything time, air, reason held its breath. Across the park, the unleashed dog was charging, muscled, furious, foam flecking its mouth. A child had screamed high-pitched and sharp just once, and then froze like prey. No one had time to react. No one but Ghost. Ethan's heart thundered. He tried to follow, to shout again, but something inside him knew this was no longer his to control. This was instinct. This was training buried under trauma, still breathing under scar tissue. Ghost ran with uneven legs, still recovering, still not whole, but every step was certain, purposeful. The sun lit the edge of his fur like a fireline, burning gold against the backdrop of chaos. "Ghost!" Ethan choked out again, stumbling forward. But Ghost didn't look back. He never looked back. 20 feet. 15. 10. The other dog lunged midair, aimed straight for the child. And that's when Ghost left the ground, not with the grace of a healthy dog, but with the heart of a soldier. He hit the attacker midair, full force. Bodies tangled, rolled, teeth flashed. A scream, not human, ripped through the field. The child bolted, fell, cried. But she was out of range now, safe. Ghost, however, wasn't. The fight was brutal and brief. Too fast for anyone to interfere. Ghost never aimed to kill, he aimed to stop. And he did. The other dog broke off, limped away, yelping and bleeding until someone grabbed its collar. Ghost staggered backward. Blood dripped from his side, from his neck, from everywhere. Ethan reached him in time to catch his fall. "Hey, hey, I've got you." His voice was trembling. Too high, too afraid. Ghost's chest rose and fell, shallow, erratic. But his eyes, they found Ethan's. Not panicked, not desperate, just calm, as if saying, "I did what I had to. That's all." "You're okay," Ethan whispered, gripping the fur tight with both hands. "You're okay, buddy. I'm right here." Ghost blinked slowly. Then, like a flicker of memory, his tail gave one weak thump against the grass. And stilled. The sirens were already on their way. People yelling. Someone shouting for help. But Ethan heard none of it. He was back in another place, another battlefield. Only this time, it wasn't a uniform beside him. It was family. He pressed his forehead to Ghost's, voice cracking like dry earth. "You didn't have to." But he knew better. Ghost always would. Always had. Ghost didn't hesitate. The leash slipped from Ethan's hand like a final thread, and in the space between one breath and the next, the dog was gone. Nothing but muscle, instinct, and memory tearing across the grass. The girl stood frozen, arms outstretched, butterfly wings fluttering behind her. The oncoming dog, massive, panicked, half-crazed, barreled forward, foam at the corners of its mouth, its growl ripping through the park like a siren. Parents screamed, people moved, but not fast enough. And then Ghost launched. Mid-stride, he lowered his body, drew in every ounce of strength his healing frame had rebuilt over the past weeks, and leapt. He met the larger dog mid-air, the collision violent and immediate. Fur and limbs tangled, growls turned feral, teeth flashed. The force of it knocked both dogs to the ground, a blur of movement and snarls. Ghost came up first. He positioned himself between the girl and the attacker, head low, stance wide, tail down, protecting. The other dog lunged again, but Ghost was ready this time. He pivoted, took the bite to the side, shoulder to shoulder, and snapped his jaws around the aggressor's scruff, holding tight, refusing to let go. Blood sprayed across the grass. Ethan was already running, heart in his throat, shouting Ghost's name, once, twice, 3 times. But Ghost didn't let go, didn't move, didn't fall. The little girl was scooped up by her mother, who sobbed as she ran in the opposite direction. Behind them, a bystander fumbled for their phone, recording everything with trembling hands. Ethan dropped to his knees beside the chaos, just as 2 other men pried the larger dog away, struggling to restrain it. It took 3 of them. Ghost staggered once, then collapsed. His chest rose and fell in uneven bursts. One ear was torn, his back leg twisted at an unnatural angle, paw trembling. Blood soaked through the fur on his neck, warm and deep. Ethan was there in an instant, hands already under him. "I've got you," he whispered, voice breaking. "I've got you, buddy. Stay with me." Ghost's eyes blinked slowly. His tail moved just once. Not a wag, not a goodbye. A signal. Mission complete. The world had gone sideways. Grass torn, people shouting, the park once filled with laughter now splintered into screams and frantic movement. Someone was calling 911. Someone else was trying to hold back the crowd. A child wailed nearby. A woman sobbed into her hands. The sun beat down too brightly, like it didn't understand what had just happened. But Ethan couldn't hear any of it. All he saw was Ghost crumpled and bleeding in his arms. His fur, once thick and golden in the light, was now matted dark with blood. His breathing came in sharp, uneven gasps, every inhale a fight, every exhale a warning. His ear hung torn, his back leg broken, his side a gash so deep Ethan had to press both hands to it just to slow the bleeding. "Hold on," Ethan whispered, voice cracking. "Please, Ghost, stay with me. You did good. You did so good." Ghost whimpered, barely a sound, just a faint vibration in the back of his throat. His eyes fluttered open, unfocused, then drifted shut again. Ethan pressed his forehead to Ghost's. "I'm right here. I'm not going anywhere. You saved her. You always save someone. Just don't leave me." The sirens came faint at first, a distant echo through the trees. But Ethan didn't look up. He didn't care how many people were watching, didn't care that his knees were soaked in blood, that his voice shook as he spoke, that his hands were red and trembling. He cared about the rise and fall of the body in his arms, and how it was starting to slow. Paramedics sprinted across the grass with a stretcher. One of them shouted, "We've got him! Step back, sir!" But Ethan wouldn't move. Ghost's eyes opened one last time, just a sliver, and then a flick. His tail twitched. Once. Soft. Like the final beat of a drum that had never stopped playing for someone else. And then it went still. It began with a single upload. Grainy, shaky, taken from a trembling hand and an old smartphone. The footage caught everything, not cleanly, not perfectly, but enough. The blur of fur across green grass, the panicked cries, the little girl frozen in place. And then, like something out of a movie, Ghost, mid-leap, colliding with the charging dog in a burst of movement and muscle. No hesitation, no handler, just instinct, just purpose. The title on the post was simple: Ghost, the dog who waited, then saved. By the end of the hour, it had 5,000 shares. By noon, local news stations were replaying the clip on loop, slowing it down frame by frame. Anchors with carefully composed sympathy read headlines that scrolled across screens. Retired canine hero saves child at local park. Dog once left for dead now, a national symbol of loyalty. Viral video captures ultimate sacrifice. Photos followed, some old, some new. Ghost in uniform. Ghost on the porch. Ghost with his head on Ethan's knee in that golden hour light. People wanted to know his story. Not just about the park, but before that. The backyard. The waiting. The soldier. The silence. They dug through forums and timelines, found the viral post Ethan had made just weeks earlier, screenshotted the caption, shared it with captions of their own. He waited for me, and now he's helping me come back too. I'm not crying, you're crying. This dog deserves a medal. Ethan's phone exploded calls, texts, voicemails from unknown numbers, reporters, advocacy groups, talk shows, magazines. They all wanted a quote, an appearance, a story. But Ethan wasn't ready, because the only headline he cared about was the one still playing on loop in his mind. He jumped. He saved her. And I couldn't stop it. And somewhere in the quiet room of the vet's ICU, behind layers of tubes and gauze, Ghost was still fighting, still holding on. The machines whispered in steady rhythms, beeps, pulses, the low hum of oxygen trying to translate what his body could no longer say. His fur had been shaved in patches, revealing raw skin stitched in red, bandages wrapped around his torso, his hind leg, the base of his neck. An IV line trailed from one paw, a catheter from the other. His breathing was shallow, labored. But it was there, and that was enough. Ethan stood just outside the glass door, arms crossed too tight against his ribs, like he was bracing for impact. The vet had said he could go in, but only one person at a time. Only when Ghost was stable enough not to crash under the weight of a heartbeat that didn't belong to him. He'd been watching for hours, eyes fixed on the faint rise and fall of Ghost's chest, as if blinking might steal a breath away. At one point, a nurse approached with a clipboard, voice soft, face trained in compassion. "We don't know if he'll make it through the night." Ethan just nodded. Didn't speak. He couldn't. Not yet. What could he possibly say? That Ghost didn't just save a child. That Ghost didn't just take the hit meant for someone else. He had chosen to fight again. After everything, after being abandoned, shot, starved, and left behind, he had still chosen to protect, not because anyone told him to, because he knew how, because something inside him still believed people were worth it. And maybe that's what broke Ethan most, because for the longest time he hadn't believed that about himself. He slid down the wall outside the ICU, body folding like paper, elbows on his knees, hands trembling, not from weakness but from too much trying to stay strong. Through the glass, Ghost didn't move, didn't stir, but Ethan kept watching, kept counting the seconds between each breath, kept whispering things into the silence, words he didn't remember saying. "You don't owe me this. You've already done more than anyone ever had to. You're not alone this time." The minutes stretched, became hours, and still Ghost held on. His tail never twitched, his eyes never opened, but the machines kept singing their soft lullaby of life. And Ethan stayed, because that was the deal now. No more walking away, no more leaving anyone behind. This time he'd wait, even if it took all night, even if it meant believing in something he didn't fully understand. Like how a dog, broken in every way, could still carry the weight of someone else's survival and choose to keep breathing through it all. The calls didn't stop. They came in waves, networks, morning shows, military podcasts, animal advocacy platforms. They all wanted the same thing, the story of the dog who waited, who saved, who nearly died doing both. At first, Ethan ignored them. He sat in the hard plastic chairs of the veterinary ICU for hours, fingers laced together so tightly his knuckles stayed white. He watched machines blink, listened to the faint rhythm of Ghost's breathing amplified through tubes, counted every rise and fall of that battered chest like it was the last one. But Ghost kept breathing. And so eventually, Ethan picked up the phone. He agreed to one interview, then another, then 3 more. Not because he wanted to talk, but because he knew Ghost's story wasn't just his anymore. The reporters asked about the park, the leap, the wound, the girl, but Ethan always brought it back to the beginning. "I found him dying in my backyard," he told them. "Skin and bones, forgotten. And still he waited. Still, he knew me." Cameras zoomed in, microphones pushed closer. "And at my worst," Ethan said, "when I couldn't breathe, when the nightmares hit, he'd crawl to me, press his head to my chest, remind me I was here." They asked if he trained Ghost to do that, if it was instinct, a leftover military response. Ethan shook his head every time. "No," he said. "I didn't rescue Ghost. He rescued me." It became a refrain, a line repeated across headlines, stitched into posts, printed under his name on national broadcasts. "I didn't rescue Ghost. He rescued me." Offers came next. A publisher, a documentary filmmaker, a brand that wanted to feature Ghost in a commercial about resilience. Ethan declined most of them, politely but firmly. This wasn't about clicks. This was about something quieter, something sacred, a bond forged in silence, a promise kept on 4 legs, a reminder that the ones who carry us aren't always the ones in uniform. Sometimes they're the ones who never needed words at all. It was just past midnight when Ethan opened his inbox. The house was quiet. Ghost still at the clinic, stabilized but not yet home. The absence felt louder than any noise. Ethan sat in the dark with the glow of the laptop casting pale light across the room, his shoulders slumped, his eyes dry but stinging. He wasn't scrolling for attention. He wasn't even reading the comments anymore. He was just there, waiting in a way he couldn't explain. Then it came. A direct message, no subject line, no introduction, just a short paragraph from someone named Marcus26. "I was going to take my life tonight. Then I saw Ghost, and I don't know why, but something made me stop. Maybe because I saw a fight in him that looked like the one I lost. Maybe because I needed to believe you could come back from something that breaks you. Either way, I'm still here. Just thought you should know." Ethan read it twice, then a third time, and then he broke. Not the kind of break that caves you in, but the kind that lets something new push through the cracks. His hands trembled. A breath shuddered out of him like it had been trapped there for years, and the tears came, silent, steady. Not from pain this time, from grace. He leaned forward, head in hands, the message still glowing on the screen behind him. "Ghost saved more than me." 7 words, but they didn't read like a compliment. They read like a lifeline, like something raw and unfinished typed by fingers that trembled too much to say more. There was no name attached, no story, just that one sentence, and yet it said everything. Ethan stayed like that for a while, bent forward, unmoving while the screen slowly dimmed, as if the words themselves had exhaled. That truth hit deeper than any headline ever could. Not the news stories, not the interviews, not the thousands of comments calling Ghost a hero. This This was different, because this didn't ask for attention. It didn't ask for views or applause. It was someone out there, someone hanging by a thread, who saw a bruised dog with stitches and scars and decided not to give up. Because if Ghost could fight his way back from the dark, maybe they could too. Ethan lifted his head slowly. His eyes burned not from the screen, but from the weight of understanding. He thought back to the night Ghost collapsed in his arms, blood soaking through his shirt. The way the dog's tail had twitched once, just once, before going still. That tiny gesture had haunted him for days. But maybe now it meant something more. Maybe that last flicker wasn't just instinct. Maybe it was Ghost saying, "Still here, still trying." And someone out there had felt that, across states, across silence, across all the spaces grief didn't know how to leave. From the foot of the couch, the leash still hung, coiled neatly, ready for home. Ethan reached for it, ran his fingers over the worn leather. The metal clip still had mud dried into its hinges, a reminder of that last walk, of how everything changed in a single heartbeat. He didn't need the leash tonight. Ghost was already asleep in the next room, chest rising and falling in slow, steady rhythm. The nightmares had faded lately. Not gone, but softer, easier to survive. Because they weren't facing them alone. And maybe that's what this message was. Not a fan letter, not praise, but a quiet echo in the dark. You're not the only one. Ethan turned back to the screen. The message was still there. He didn't write back. He didn't need to. Instead, he uncoiled the leash, hung it gently by the door, and for the first time in a long time, he turned off the porch light, not out of fear, but because the waiting was over. Ghost had led someone else home, too. The envelope came by mail. Thick, cream-colored, embossed with gold trim, and the emblem of a paw inside a star. Ethan turned it over in his hands twice before opening it. Something about it felt too formal, too distant from the porch and the dirt and the blood-soaked grass where this all began. Inside was a letter, typed, polished. Dear Mr. Mallory, we are honored to inform you that Ghost has been selected as a national finalist for the American Hero Dog Awards. Your story and his has touched millions. We would be privileged to celebrate his courage, loyalty, and service on a stage worthy of his legacy. With respect, the Hero Dog Committee. Below was a date, a venue, New York City. Ethan sat back in the kitchen chair, letter in one hand, coffee untouched beside him. The idea of cameras and spotlights and formal wear felt absurd. This wasn't how heroes were supposed to be honored. Not the quiet ones. Not the ones who never asked for anything but a second chance. He looked over at the living room rug. Ghost was there, resting, always resting now, but better. His stitches had come out. The fur on his side had begun to grow in. The limp would never fully go away, but he didn't seem to care. Ethan held the letter a moment longer, then set it on the counter and walked into the living room. He crouched beside Ghost and ran a hand over his head. "What do you think?" he asked quietly. "Red carpets and stage lights? Doesn't really sound like us." Ghost's eyes stayed closed, but after a beat he shifted, and then thump. His tail tapped the floor once, then again. Ethan chuckled, breath catching in his throat. "That's a yes?" Ghost didn't answer. He didn't need to. He nudged Ethan's wrist with his nose, soft and certain, like he always had when it was time to move forward, whether toward danger, recovery, or something unknown. Ethan looked back at the letter. It had come that morning tucked inside an official envelope printed on heavyweight paper that smelled faintly of starch and ceremony. The seal at the top bore a gold emblem, American Hero Dog Awards, finalist invitation. He hadn't opened it right away. Instead, it had sat on the table, untouched, while Ethan paced back and forth, then out to the porch, then in again, as if movement alone could make the decision for him. Ghost had followed each lap quietly, never pushing, never asking, just there, present, watching. And now, as the sun dipped low and the room filled with long shadows, Ghost gave his answer. Not in words, not in wagging or theatrics, just a nudge, steady, real. Ethan looked down at him. The dog's eyes were tired, rimmed in pale scars, and the wear of things survived. But in them still burned the same clarity that had once led men through fire, through rubble, through the dark. A knowing that said, "We're not done." "All right," Ethan whispered. "Then let's go finish this." He folded the letter slowly, pressed it flat again, and tucked it inside the old leather journal he hadn't written in since deployment. Ghost's collar clinked gently as he stood, legs stiff but certain. The sound filled the room with something like purpose. In the hallway mirror, Ethan caught a glimpse of them both. A man not quite healed, a dog not quite whole, but both here. Still walking, still showing up, still answering calls that didn't always come with sirens but mattered just the same. As Ethan reached for the leash, Ghost moved beside him without command, as if the next step was always inevitable. Not forced, not flashy, just deserved. He turned off the light, opened the door, and paused. The porch was bathed in amber dusk. Wind moved through the trees with the softness of memory, and for one breath everything stood still, the kind of stillness that doesn't ask for silence, but reverence. And then they stepped into it, man and dog, shadow and survivor. No spotlight, no applause, just forward. The theater lights dimmed. A hush fell over the room, not the kind born of routine applause, but the quiet of reverence. Rows of tuxedos and evening gowns blurred beneath the gold glow of chandeliers. On the velvet-lined stage of the Hero Dog Awards in Manhattan, the final spotlight paused on an empty ramp. Then came the sound, a soft, uneven rhythm of pause. Ghost emerged from behind the curtain, led gently by Ethan. His gait was slow, deliberate, a limp that told the truth. But his head was high, his ears alert, and when he reached the center of the stage, he stopped on his own. The room rose to its feet. It wasn't loud, not at first. It was the kind of standing ovation that builds wave after wave. Hands clapping not just for survival, but for something more ancient, more intimate, for loyalty, for what was lost and somehow found again. Ethan adjusted the microphone. His dress shirt was stiff at the collar. He wasn't used to stages, or crowds, but Ghost leaned against his leg, and the warmth was enough. He took a breath. "I didn't come here to give a speech," he began, voice rough from travel and memory. "Truth is, I don't think I have the right words, because what Ghost did, it doesn't fit in a headline or a trophy." He paused. "This dog waited in silence for over a year, hurt, starving, alone. And when I came back, when I didn't even deserve to be found, he forgave me. No bark, no blame, just trust." He looked down. Ghost's eyes were on him. He gave everything, Ethan said softly. Not because someone trained him to, not because it was expected, but because that's what love looks like. The real kind. The kind that crawls through brokenness to get to you. A hush fell again. Then, slowly, Ethan knelt beside Ghost and whispered the words only he and the dog would understand. The applause returned, but neither of them stood right away. Sometimes the most heroic thing in the world is staying. The limousine disappeared into the night, swallowed by pine-shadowed roads and the hush of small-town stillness. Streetlights grew fewer, the stars returned, and as the taxi pulled up to the front of Ethan's childhood home, now theirs, the porch light was already glowing. He hadn't left it on, but it was there, waiting, just like Ghost had been. Ethan stepped out first. His hand hovered near the back seat, but Ghost didn't wait for help. He lowered himself down, legs stiff but steady, and followed Ethan up the steps with a tired grace. There were no cameras now, no crowds, no velvet ropes or spotlights, just wooden planks underfoot and the soft creak of memory. The house hadn't changed, not really. Same chipping paint, same wind chimes. But tonight, it felt warmer. Not because of the thermostat, but because of what they'd brought back with them. Something unspoken, earned. Home. Ethan opened the door. Didn't bother with the lights. The glow from the porch was enough. Ghost stepped inside, paused, and turned in a slow half-circle like he always did when checking for threats, even now. Then he lay down, gently, beside the old armchair. Ethan sank into it. Shoulders loosened, tie still knotted but forgotten. And just like he used to, during the worst nights, Ghost rested his head on Ethan's foot, not for warmth, not for comfort, just to say, "I'm here." No words were spoken, none needed. The silence wasn't hollow anymore. It was whole. It was peace. The porch creaked gently beneath the weight of years, and quiet as the final sliver of sun dipped behind the tree line. Ethan sat still, hands resting on his lap, a warm mug untouched beside him. Ghost lay curled at his feet, head on his paws, one ear twitching softly in response to the breeze. His breathing was deep, steady, no longer labored, no longer braced against pain, just being, just here. And for once, Ethan didn't search the silence for ghosts. He didn't flinch at passing cars or distant echoes. He didn't brace himself for what might go wrong. He simply let the moment exist. The wind carried the scent of pine, warm earth, and distant smoke. From inside the house, a photo on the mantel caught the last shimmer of daylight. Ethan in uniform, hand on Ghost's harness, frozen in time. It wasn't pride that photo held anymore. It was memory. It was grace. Ghost stirred only once, shifting closer, his head now pressed gently against Ethan's boot. That simple contact held more comfort than any medal, any speech, any crowd. It was enough, more than enough. Ethan didn't say anything aloud, but in his heart he offered a quiet thank you. For every moment Ghost had waited, for every time he didn't give up, for the loyalty that had once looked like a dog sitting outside a hospital room and now looked like peace curled beside him in the dusk. There had been so much noise once, in war, in grief, in the crashing ache of things left unsaid. But now, silence had changed. It wasn't an emptiness to be feared. It was a presence to be honored. This was what healing looked like. Not dramatic, not cinematic, just stillness shared. Time passed. A bird called from the woods. A screen door clattered in the distance. Somewhere far off, a child's laugh rose and faded. Life was still moving. But here on this porch, in this slanting light, it didn't have to move quickly. It only had to be. And they were. 2 survivors, 2 healers, 1 final sunset, and the quiet understanding between them that everything they'd been through had led exactly here. Not perfect, not erased, but whole. At last. The mornings started earlier now, not because of restlessness, but because of intention. Sunlight spilled through the kitchen window in golden streaks as Ethan filled 2 bowls, one with kibble, the other with water, and slid them across the tile. Ghost, still stiff in his hind legs, made his way over, tail tapping the cabinets in rhythm. It was quiet, but not the empty kind. The kind that held presence, ritual, life. Ethan's boots scuffed the doorway as he grabbed his keys and clipped on Ghost's harness, still marked with the faded letters of a title earned, not given, K9 unit. The drive wasn't far. Just past the edge of town, where an old horse barn had been converted into something softer. On its sign read, Haven Paws, Healing for 2. Below it, smaller, Veteran and Rescue Dog Integration Center. Inside, the air carried the scent of fresh hay and disinfectant. But more than that, it carried stories. Dozens. Some broken, some rebuilding. And Ethan, who once came home with nothing but ghosts, now came here with Ghost, to help others come back from their own. He walked beside a man younger than him, face pale under a veteran cap. The guy's voice trembled when he said, "I haven't touched a leash since Kabul." Ethan didn't push. He just knelt beside the dog one rescued from a flood, eyes too wise for her years, and guided her toward the man's trembling hand. "She doesn't need orders," Ethan said quietly. "She just needs you to sit with her." Ghost lay down at the man's feet, as if showing the way. By the end of the session, the man was crying not from pain, but from release. Ethan didn't offer advice. He didn't need to. He had a new mission now. No uniform, no rank, just a leash in one hand, and a quiet certainty in his chest that some wars weren't won by force but by presence. Ghost nudged his palm on the way out as if to say, "That was good." And Ethan smiled, not wide, not showy, just enough to soften the lines that war had carved across his face. This wasn't the life he'd imagined. It was better. The hallway wasn't wide, just enough space for 2 people to walk side by side without brushing shoulders, but every inch of it breathed memory. Along one side stretched the wall of tales, what the volunteers called it, half jokingly, half reverently. It wasn't grand, no fancy plaques, just a row of framed photos, mismatched but lovingly kept. Dogs of every size, shape, and shade. Some posed in uniforms, others mid-leap or caught in candid, blurry joy. And below each frame, a line of text, simple but true. Ethan had passed it a dozen times, always slowing at the end where the newer editions went. But today, he didn't just pass. Today, he stopped. A new frame had been hung. In the center, Ghost. Standing tall in the field behind the center, fur bristled by the breeze, his eyes locked on something unseen. Not in defense, in purpose. Below the photo, a brass plate read, "He waited, he protected, he led others home." Ethan didn't move for a long time. His hand hovered near the photo, but didn't touch it. as if breaking the stillness might undo something sacred. Behind him, a young woman walked in with a golden retriever tugging at the leash. She paused beside him, eyes lifting to the picture. "That's him, isn't it?" she asked. Ethan nodded. No need to explain who him was. "I read your post," she continued softly. "I was in a dark place. Then I saw him, saw the way he looked at you, like you were worth staying for." Ghost lay a few feet back, resting quietly in a patch of sun near the door. He didn't look up, but his tail tapped twice. Ethan exhaled. This wasn't about medals, not about viral videos or headlines long forgotten. It was about this moments when one life reminded another how to begin again. And now, his ghost once left in silence, now framed in light, would keep doing that, day after day, tale after tale, long after words had faded. He turned and looked once more at the wall. It didn't just hold pictures, it held returns. The sky didn't blaze that evening, it whispered. A soft orange stretched across the horizon like the breath of something long held finally let go. The porch creaked gently beneath Ethan's boots as he sat, elbows resting on his knees, eyes lost in the falling light. Beside him, Ghost lay with his head nestled against Ethan's boot right, where he had always come for peace. The wind stirred. The old wind chime rattled once, then settled. Ethan didn't speak. He didn't need to. There were no more apologies to give, no more guilt to chew through, no more what-ifs to chase. The silence wasn't hollow anymore. It had weight now, warmth, like something earned. Ghost shifted just slightly, a low exhale from his nose. His fur had grown thick again, the bald patches filled. The scars hadn't vanished, but they no longer looked like endings. They looked like chapters. Their shadows stretched long across the porch and into the yard. Two figures cast in quiet companionship. One, broad, scarred, bent slightly forward. The other low, strong, loyal anchored. For a moment, it could have been a memory, or a beginning. The world still carried its noise, its sharp edges and cold nights, but not here, not now. Here, on this porch, as the sun bowed out gently behind them, there was only this. A soldier who came home too late, a dog who waited too long, and somehow in the middle of all that loss they had found not just each other, but something bigger, a new kind of service, a quieter kind of rescue, a story not shouted, but felt. Ethan reached down, resting his hand lightly on Ghost's neck. The German shepherd didn't move, just sighed once, deep and slow. As the last of the light slipped behind the trees, their shadows remained, etched into the grain of the wood, into the earth beneath the porch, into the kind of silence that no longer hurts. Two survivors, two healers, one story. And a promise that none of it had been in vain. In a world that often moves too fast to notice the quiet ones left behind, stories like Ethan and Ghost's remind us of something deeper, something enduring. Love isn't always loud. Sometimes it's the silent wait at a broken kennel, the thump of a tail in the dark, the decision to stay when no one else does. This is more than just a story about a soldier and his dog. It's a story about loyalty that doesn't expire, about healing that doesn't come in pills, but in paw prints on old floorboards, about second chances, not just for dogs discarded when their purpose seems over, but for people who forget that they, too, are worth saving. German shepherds, like Ghost, carry more than commands. They carry memories, trauma, trust. And when we let them in, truly in, they carry us forward. May we honor those who wait without asking, who love without needing, and who heal in the gentlest, most unexpected ways. And may we all remember, sometimes the bravest thing isn't going to war, it's coming home and letting love find you again, because some souls don't bark to be heard. They just stay to be felt.